Yeah, so thanks for joining us. I really appreciate you for taking this time. And something that I wanted to kind of bring up is that I have watched a lot of interviews with you by this point, and like listened to you on like different podcasts and stuff. And something that I realized about you is that you're very kind. And I'm curious if you think of yourself in that way, and if you're conscious of that, or where does that come from exactly?
You know, I think it's a small town mentality that where I grew up, and this is where I am now. I'm in Bakersfield currently, and we are working on some new music. And I feel like once I moved to Los Angeles, there's so many people all the time, and they're being just terrible. And I remember as our band started to kind of become more popular, and we started to tour with big bands. There's some other musicians that we toured with that were big that I felt like they were so nice to us, and I felt like it was something that I needed to also extend, but I think it's just in my nature as well.
Hmm.
But let me tell you what, I'm a mama's boy. That's probably what it is.
Yeah.
And to be honest, and she kind of instilled in me to always be polite, treat people like you want to be treated,
Yeah.
and that all that kind of traditional mom stuff when you're young. And I think it, you know, I think it helped me become a better person and a better listener, compassionate, and very full of empathy.
Hmm. Yeah, because I even noticed that on I mean, this is it sounds so silly, but um I noticed that on this TMZ video that
Yeah.
that's
Oh
out
no.
there, and you're
Oh
just
yeah.
so kind. And I was just like, I think most people would probably be incredibly annoyed um at a sort of situation like that. It seemed like you were like going to the airport or something like that. And I don't know, I think just understanding that we're all human, and we all have certain needs. And I'm sure, I mean, just speaking of that perspective in general, like that person at TMZ, they're probably have a family, or they're supported, you know what I mean? And
I've always looked at things like that, and I always think, you know, it doesn't matter what we do, or, it's just a humanity way to talk to people. Even like the maid here is cleaning the room, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, you're so nice," and she's like, just
Mhm.
it's just it's I feel like it's just the way my mind and soul work.
Yeah.
So,
Well, mm.
oh, go
Oh
ahead,
no.
Yoshino.
No. Go for it. Go for it, man.
I was just kind of going to ask how is it Venera the way it's pronounced technically?
Yeah, Chris Hunt and I kind of gone back and forth. Venera was what he said,
Okay.
and Venera was easier for me to say. Um, so it's kind of a funny inside joke now. He always says Venera, and I'll say Venera.
Because
So I kind of like that because it's again art, and it's up to the
right.
interpretation. So whatever's easier.
Yeah. How did that project begin, and kind of what was like the impotence of it, I guess?
My sister-in-law was has a couple of friends in LA that do videos and short films,
Mm-hmm.
and I think Chris had put some music or had helped with the production on a short film,
Okay.
and he had done some audio as well and some music, and she really liked the sounds and the aesthetic of the video, and she kind of found him on Instagram and
Oh, wow.
kind of looked through all of his posts and his profile, and she's like, "Oh, I'm going to contact this guy to help me do some songwriting." So, he comes to LA, helps her put some music together, and then asks me if I'd like to perform on one of the songs. And I said, sure. I'm down to work with anybody, honestly.
And this was on a short film?
No, this was on her, like it was an EP that she did
okay.
for
I see.
for some music. And I was like,
Gotcha.
yeah, I'd love to come in. So when I came into the studio and him and I started working, and I just started to fiddle, like, I'm plugging my guitar and just trying to find my sounds. And he goes, "Ooh, what's that?" And I'm like, "That's the noise of me plugging in my with the delay on, and it's just like a bzz, 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 bzz."
Right.
And he's like, "That's cool." And I was like, "Okay, that's unusual." And
Right.
then I'd do a little tiny pick scrape or some noise or something kind of unintentional. And he's like, "Oh, that's really good." And I'm like, it doesn't really mean playing. It's
Not
more like
doing
the
anything.
instrument making sound. And I'm trying to find different parts of the instrument to create more sound out of that, like knocking on the wood, with the guitar turned up and some reverb on to. And he's like, "Oh, that's really cool." And I'm like, okay, there's someone else that really thinks that these noises are cool as well. And so him and I kind of created a dialogue after that. And we're like, "Oh, what do you think about this?" And we just were like kind of geeking out on different recordings of artists and stuff. And then, he's like, "We should definitely do something together."
And that was like the first
absolutely.
That was the first time you guys met and kind of worked together, huh?
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
awesome.
So once we, let me tell you, and I've had, songwriting sessions and, that were planned, and, you pair off with somebody, and it made me feel so lucky to have the guys in my band, because we have such a musical vocabulary where we don't really even have to talk during our sessions. Just like we know what the other one's thinking, and we can kind of finish the musical sentence with our instruments. So to find somebody else halfway across the world is, pretty special. I was
Definitely.
like, okay, I think this guy is really going to help. We're going to help each other bring our musical, some of our musical tastes to a project, or,
Where is he from?
He's from Atlanta.
Gotcha.
Yeah, he flies out, and we'll do 3 or 4 days, and we've cataloged hours of music.
Wow, that's awesome.
And all of it's born out of these, kind of jam sessions, improvised sessions, where one of us will start, or I'll start playing a few notes, and he'll have like a synth or a drum machine, and it's all like off the grid. There's nothing gridded into the computer, so it's pretty. There's very little boundaries.
That's pretty wild for it being like an electronic project. It being on off the grid or unscripted, kind of not like more loose and not locked in compared to 99% of electronic or trip hop or anything is very synced up.
Yeah, that was one of the funnest things about the project. When I was like, there's so much freedom creatively. I could, there's kind of do no wrong. It was just kind of like whatever. And him and I kind of we would follow each other, but it kind of also we would see where it led us, if that makes sense.
You're kind of
wherever the kind of trust the process, and
right.
just, if things kind of turn dark, or if he hit a dark note or tone, I would kind of follow that. Um, it was, and then of course it got edited down. All of
Right.
the improvised sessions had to kind of like, well, let's find where the best part, and let's find out where the story is.
Right.
Yeah, and early in the project, once we had some of the first recordings that we did together, he sent me this article about how how the Russians sent up a few satellites up to Venus, and they were called Venera.
Yeah, I was looking that up actually.
There was a series of different satellites, and they went up to try to record the sound and measure the atmosphere and do a lot of just check the environment of this kind of this planet that not a lot of people know too much about. The name was kind of like, it's interesting. It's just like exploring a satellite, going out to look at this planet, and some of the sounds that they had captured were kind of haunting.
Yeah.
And then I started thinking about the planet itself, and how it's like, Venus is the planet, the planet of love, but then when you get into it, it's got this violent,
violent atmosphere.
Yes, and I was like, the two contrasts, the kind of juxtapose of this beautiful love planet, and then I was like, wow, that's such a.
Did you kind of feel like you were writing the soundtrack to it?
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I felt like we were creating. We were kind of like, here we are, kind of on this journey with this satellite. Maybe landing or discovering an extraterrestrial life form or something on the surface or beneath the surface, and it kind of took on its life of its own from there.
That's awesome.
Did you two watch any films or anything in the making and creation of the album?
You know what? We didn't. It was like every time we get together, we just started recording sound.
That's awesome.
And we would reference different, different films or shows or stuff like that. And
which films or shows, just for context?
Probably a couple of David Lynch films. What was the other one? True Detective, which is, very earthy, I guess.
That first season's incredible.
Yeah,
they're all really good, but yeah.
Yeah, that was specifically the season. What else? I was sharing with him. Of course, Black Mirror. Everyone loves Black Mirror.
The crowd pleaser.
Yeah, it is. It is. Just different, unusual, strange and beautiful things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Did anything like wild or unexpected happen in the writing or recording? Like more so than that kind of always happens, when you're making art, but more than usual, I guess.
We had this one crazy. It was, it wasn't that unexpected, but it was like, let's try something different, because I have a studio downtown LA, and it's got such a great vibe there. But we had done a lot of the recording there in the room, and it's this big, industrial warehouse, and it has these big like vaulted ceilings that are, it's an old factory.
Have you done interviews there in the past? Like video interviews?
Yeah,
I think I might have.
Yes, it's got these red curtains.
I think I watched maybe like you and Head were breaking down some of your riffs or something like that for an interview.
Yeah, that's a funny interview.
Yeah.
And I've done a lot of stuff there. It's a creative space that,
Yeah.
my wife and I needed to get, because the pandemic was really stifling creativity at the house. And I had no studio. So I was like, I have to have a place to go make music or just make
Totally.
noise. And she has a place to go to shoot photos and paint and stuff. But we decided, so it has an amazing rooftop
Mhm.
that overlooks downtown Los Angeles. And it has another big, very, very big, kind of cavernous structure on the top. And it was raining one night, and we decided to take a little, just to kind of see how a live situation would kind of work. And so we took from where my studio up onto the roof.
Oh, wow.
And put it inside this, and just with a few elements. And he had a few small like field recorders. And we went up there and ended up there for 6 hours, like performing just him and I. And his wife, his partner, was there recording some video. And we didn't know, how this was going to work, what we're going to do. And we just did what we did. We start with the sound, and it just,
that's amazing,
took off. And it was, we had the rain in the background, because it was, LA had a lot of rain maybe a few months ago in the beginning of the year. And it was so much fun, and we didn't know what to expect, and it turned out really good. And we have these recordings of it, and basically unedited.
Can you describe the feeling of creating that music? Because it sounds to me very like free and experimental. And
yeah, with this, I think so. It's funny because people really associate me and what I do with like heavy, like striking riffs, and I love that. I love doing that. Although this is something that's hitting a different, a few different on my palette of creativity. It's satisfying that kind of, I don't know. It does something. It puts me in the moment that like nothing else does, because I'm letting a lot of the effects drive the sound instead of my right hand or whatever.
Right.
Or I use what's called an EBow. You probably know what that is, James.
I love EBows. Yeah.
EBow will there's so many on the record. There's so many EBows, what sound like keyboards. There's layers of EBows on the album. I think a lot of people may not know they're hearing guitar.
See, I was curious because when I was listening to it, I was like, okay, I can tell this has like your flavor on it, but it didn't sound like guitar. And I was like, is he playing synth on this? Is it,
Yeah. I think that's why a lot of people were like, wait, what? I don't hear his guitar. What? But they're hearing it. They just don't know it's a
I didn't even think
guitar.
about an EBow. Yeah. I haven't played, but I think I still have one. I haven't played one in years, but
oh my God, it's so much fun, especially when
awesome.
you put lots of reverb, and then I'll put an octave.
Have that like blue light on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it's this little gray little gizmo
box. Yeah.
And it
magnetizes the string, right? Where it kind of vibrates.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It'll throw some sort of magnet, kind of a pickup thing that just sustains the note for if you place it on a string.
Yep.
So there's tons of that, and people may not even know.
That's awesome.
It's this. It creates all these layers of which could be a chord or one droning note. It's a lot of fun to mess with.
I love that story about going to the rooftop and kind of switching up your environment, your practice, because your session would have never come to pass if you wouldn't have done that. is that something you feel like that you'll continue? It's probably something you've always done, but something you'll continue to do as far as like switching up practices or environments or just different backwards routes to creativity?
Yeah, I mean, we had such a great experience, and we wanted to kind of explore other spaces and kind of take this to unusual. What if we take it to, the cave over near the Hollywood sign, or or inside of a cathedral, or what about an old abandoned subway tunnel? And we imagined and kind of using the natural reverb of these spaces to create something different, unusual.
It's like its own tool kind of like in itself.
Yeah, maybe filming a little bit of it, so we had some, short films or jams or something, and kind of uploading those and letting people see and experience some of those spaces as well. Because I think that's, visually, we live in such a visual driven society too now, that I feel like people would love to see some of the spaces that that we're visiting, or it's an idea, it's sort of it's on the to-do list. So,
and it's also kind of like, who knows what could happen, songwriting wise in those types of places too. It's cool.
Yeah, I mean, I could just get scared and drop my guitar, scream like a girl, and run out of there if I heard something weird.
Right.
From the start of you guys starting Korn, I mean, was there that kind of dynamic synergy, or how would you exactly describe it?
Well, since we grew up together, we were always in bands, and we grew up out here. So there was definitely a like-minded feel. But, we realized, Ross helped us realize our strengths. He's like, you're good at this and you do this. And Brian's great at melodies, and, everybody, and Fieldy had this thing where, he would slap and it almost sound like a percussive thing, almost like a percussion thing happening that complemented David's playing and David's drumming, and it gave it a hip hop feel. I think a lot of what we did in the early days came from a lot of our influence on like gangster rap.
That's awesome.
Mixing that with metal and kind of. But yeah, there's that, because we all kind of grew up listening to a lot of the same music, Public Enemy and NWA.
Yeah,
that's the stuff that we listened to when we weren't playing. When we weren't playing music, was hip hop.
Yeah,
and some of the records that they sampled, and some of the, I guess, just the raw feeling of that gangster rap stuff, like that was happening in the late 80s.
Mm-hmm. That's so interesting, because like inspiration can come from so many different places, and like being able to kind of mix things that might be contradictory and like a sort of like a genre, or like how people segment genres, but actually molding different influences together can really create some sort of like dynamic, fluid thing. I'm curious if you like, what was your take on that?
Yeah, I think we were experimenting, and we were taking a lot of influences. Like Faith No More was a big influence when we were growing up.
Oh, totally.
They still are. I listen to their older records often, because I feel like they were so ahead of their time in what they did and what they do.
back then, were you conscious of, like, were you in the whole band conscious of taking those, as you said, like gangster rap influences and molding it into your guys' sound? Or do you think that was more of like a natural progression of things, and then later on, like a couple years down the line, you were able to pinpoint that was kind of the origin of some of those ideas?
I think it was a conscious decision. I feel like we were trying to create something that had a hip hop influence, and but also we had to create something that Jonathan could kind of sing over,
right?
So there had to be a melodic sense, and like the early Sepultura albums were a big influence. Like the album Chaos AD was,
oh god, it's the best,
game changer for us. And
Arise.
Of course Pantera, yes, Arise was a big influence. Even Red Hot Chili Peppers, because they were doing something different at the time.
Yeah.
When we moved to LA, there was all these, this hair metal was everywhere. It was like, we were so turned off by it and tired of it. That was just like, God, let's just do something different. That's, that's gonna kind of satisfy what we want to hear.
Yeah.
Let's create a band that of things that, who cares what everybody else is doing? Let's make something that's unique and something that's that we love. That's all we cared about. Let's make sounds that we love. Let's make songs that are different and that we're happy with. And then if everybody likes it, great. If nobody likes it, oh well, we love it.
Have you ever thought about, like, if there was an alternate universe that existed where Korn did not become popular, like as kind of like as popular as you guys did, like what that universe would look like and like how your life would change?
I imagine myself that I would still kind of be involved in music in some way, even if it was like, working at a studio or something. When I was, because when we first moved to LA, I was like, oh my God, this is such a massive city with all these bands, and what else could I do just in case, even though I imagine, I was like, maybe I could work for a studio or assistant to, a producer or something like that. But that never really took the forefront. It was always like, this is our path. And we kind of like, we could never, I guess, move back to town, It was like, once we move, we move. Like, there's no coming back. So we have to make this happen. We wanted to prove to our friends and family that we're doing this because this is a dream we believe in. We believe in, we believed in ourselves so wholeheartedly that we were going to make this thing work.
How much do you think the success of Korn was attributed to luck or just pure hard work?
I believe it is luck, timing, and hard work together. Having the right people believe in and hearing the unique, like finding somebody like Ross Robinson identified. And I kind of met him, was outside of a club when we had an LAPD show. This was the band before we were Korn. We had a different singer. Brian wasn't in the band. And it was more like Chili Peppers, kind of funky.
Kind of funk metal, I remember.
Yeah, it was funk thrash was the big thing then. Like in the late 80s. If it was in a hair metal band, it was like a thrash band. And so
even that had a Faith No More kind of vibe, though.
Yeah, it did. We tried to kind of like use that influence of those guys, and again, those guys were doing something that nobody else was doing. So yeah, what was the question? Sorry, I got it sidetracked.
Oh no, I mean I was just asking, like, what your perspective was of how much of the success of Korn was based on luck or on just dedication and hard work.
It's still hard work. It's still dedication. It's still luck. I mean, it's, you know, it was also about going out to try to prove to people we were not only hardworking, but trying to prove to people that we were doing something unique and trying to gain their attention by doing something that was different. So, but I think all of it, you know, and then finding people that trusted you, you know, like a record label that believed in us, and a few people in the industry that were like, wow, these guys are, you know, doing, you know, they sold out the whiskey, or, you know, 400 people at the Roxy. And then back then there was the Coconut Teaser, and there's all these clubs that were selling out. And I think it grabbed the attention of some industry people and some fans. So we had a pretty good fan base, you know, locally speaking.
Yeah.
What do you feel like was like the biggest struggle then versus your biggest struggle now as an artist? And is there any overlap there?
I think back then our biggest struggle was just to make rent.
Right.
Yeah. Basic needs.
Basic needs. Like, you know, we would work all these odd jobs, and there was 8 of us living in a 2-bedroom apartment.
Oh shit.
We had 5 of us were in the band, and then a few other people would stay there, and we would, you know, collect rent from them, as, you know, with whatever money we had. And then we had to make, you know, rehearsal studio money to pay for that as well. And then, you know, of course, we had to have beer.
Yeah, of course, a necessity.
You know, to make it the fuel the fuel the fire.
Yeah. Of course.
But now there's no beer. And now we have families. So now the struggle is finding time to be creative and to get in the studio and write music. And finding time is probably the biggest struggle now to create.
I was just going to ask if you had any like specific habits or processes that help improve your creativity or your creative process, kind of like as like a regular practice.
I think in general, if I'm exercising, it helps clear my mind for new ideas. Generally, if I have an exercise morning where I can get some cardio,
what kind of exercise do you do?
Well, you know, I'll do some 3 times a week. I'll do, you know, some weight training, but cardio, like treadmill. You know, I have a trainer who helps me. You know, he's got me doing, you know, the battle ropes, and which are really hard, and a good cardio. You know, regular, like, you know, sit-ups, and, you know, he's got me doing, you know, these hanging abs, I can call it, where you put your arms in the straps and lift your knees.
Totally.
We do a bunch of those. Those are really hard, and it's good for my back, because if you ever seen us perform, it's like a lot of, you know, head banging, and
sure.
It's a full workout, and it helps with that too. You know, it helps keep my body in tune and in shape for live performances. But you know, a cup of coffee before our sessions, or, you know, I'm a big coffee drinker. So is our drummer Ray. He's a big coffee drinker. I feel like, you know, maybe just turning off my phone and kind of just to get in the zone, and you know, I'm just imagining myself going and sitting down, like what I'll do today at our session. And, you know, I'll go in the room and turn on my guitar and I'll start messing with some effects pedals in front of me and trying to find a 2 or 3 notes that sound good together. But yeah, I think that the health portion of my life today, is really important to, yeah. And when I was young, I always thought, like, before I stopped drinking, because I was pretty bad. We all kind of had our moments where we faced addiction problems, and there was a thing that said, "Oh, you're not going to be as creative, if you're, not high or something." Right. And I found that to be the opposite. I found that I'm so clear now to translate my idea and communicate with the other guys what it is I'm trying to say musically, and it's much better. And the live shows are so much better too.
Yeah.
Not only do we sound better live because everybody's playing together,
right?
Yeah.
But it's you think, I see some old videos and it's just like, oh, it's a train wreck, And at the time you're like, oh my God, it was so good.
It's a cool train wreck.
And now years later I see, yeah. But now it's like, oh, I can actually interact with exchange energy with the crowd and feel present,
right.
and feel the adrenaline and get a real high from being up there. And I get that too when we're creating, when we're in the studio and listening to something that we just writ, like have a song that we had just written. Mm-hmm. And like, that's my real enjoyment of this is, that excitement of hearing a new creation kind of come to life, a new idea with everybody involved. And you look around the room and you're like, yeah, this is cool. Like, and then you start imagining it in a live situation. How's it going to translate? Is it going to put people to sleep? Is it going to, well, and then you kind of like, well, we like it,
Yeah. What do you think changed within you that you knew that you needed to become sober?
Oh man. My life became unmanageable, and I think it kind of, after I lost my father, and my mom had passed away in the early 2000s, and then my dad around 2008, and it was, I took it really hard, and it was in a really dark place. And I'm like, one side of me was thinking like, I have everything, and just the pain of losing both of my parents, and it kind of, the addiction spiraled out of control, and it got so bad to where, I was just, like a lot of addicts, you just don't want to live anymore. That's when I knew it was like, okay. And also my now wife was like, I'm tired of this. I'm not going to put up with it. And I'm going to leave unless you unless you stop. And, that was my ultimatum she gave me. And, I'm so glad that she did, because honestly, I wouldn't be alive if she didn't.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that, and congratulations for being able to turn your life around like that. That's a huge,
thank you.
That's a huge accomplishment.
It really, it is, because, with so many people in my industry and in the music industry that, I feel like there's so, like, to go back to the beginning of the conversation, musicians and artists are sensitive people. Right. And there's so many things that affect us emotionally that will use alcohol or drugs to kind of like suppress those emotions and that we feel. And that's why I think it's so common
Yeah.
in our industry. That we're very sensitive people, and we have just lost so many colleagues that have suffered from addiction. It's very sad, and but I really think it's because we're such sensitive people, you know.
Definitely. Do you feel like that you're able to kind of through creativity hit like a higher transcendent spiritual level than you were before being sober?
100%. I had, you know, I'm able to meditate.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a big part of it, like finding a spiritual, leading a spiritual life and being able to tap into those energies, and where I feel like that stuff, like drinking and using drugs or whatever it might be, can really block all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's definitely something that I've, learned to embrace and use it as a tool to create and find inspiration.
That's awesome. It seems like those are the kind of things that are, always there for any type of creatives. It's just like a matter of finding the way to find it and harness it. And sometimes that stuff can do the opposite of it, I guess. And when you really think it's that those substances are kind of understanding you, but it's really like inhibiting you from understanding yourself in a creative way, at least for me personally, sometimes.
Totally. And what's even worse about that is that there's this romanticization of like, this sort of caricature of like what an artist's like life can look like, or, like, I don't know, someone that comes to mind is like Hunter S. Thompson, or, like people that lead these from the outside, maybe some people would think it's like interesting and romantic, or like Bukowski, or, some of these, or like musicians or whatever, there's countless stories, but in a lot of ways, like you don't know what those people are going through. But for some reason in like the Western world, that kind of is romanticized in this way. And I think that's really toxic, because you're not that person. You don't know how they feel, and perhaps the way that they're acting is because they are trying to, like you said, like suppress certain things, or not deal with honestly with certain things that have been going on with that person, with themselves.
Yeah, I feel like it growing up and experimenting with psychedelics,
Mm-hmm.
there's definitely some good ideas, depending on how far you take it. And there's some self-awareness about the world and where you exist inside of that bubble within a world within a world. But yeah, it's once or twice it's okay.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's like,
Yeah.
How many times can I look in the mirror and be like, oh my God, my skin's melting? It's like,
Yeah.
it's just, it's not really helping at a certain point. Yes, you can come up with some amazing ideas, but it's not,
There's other
ways.
ways to explore the underworld than having to go there with substances, or you know what I mean, or even drawing from like past experiences, and then being able to like being a sober person, right? Like being able to like think about like what made you want to partake in those substances and those things, and trying to pull some sort of meaning from from that, from those experiences.
Yeah. For me, I was, just I was, going through this thing early because there was trauma in my childhood, so I had a lot of band-aids to try to mask that trauma. And I didn't realize that until I was in my mid-20s, that's where it was coming from.
Yeah. And do you think music, actually, I'm curious, like, how did you, just kind of as a general question, but how did you get into music in the first place?
So, growing up out here, there wasn't much to do. There's, it's a farming, agricultural town. And, playing music was, well, the reason I got into music was because I snuck out late one night and I was going to a party and I, cut the end of my finger off.
Oh, shit.
But it was an
How?
accident. So I was sneaking out of the garage, my motorcycle, and the chain was loose and it was like midnight. And we had this dog that would bark at anything. And if it barked so loud, my dad would wake up because he's like, what's going on out there? And so I didn't want the dog to bark. I didn't want my dad to wake up and catch me. And so for some reason, I put my hand underneath the chain. I wanted to put my hand underneath the chain because it kept hitting the chain guard, and my finger went into the small sprocket of the motor, and in between the sprocket and the chain, and so it's it got stuck, and so I pulled it out, and it was bleeding, and it was nasty. So I was like, oh, I guess I better go in and wake my parents up and tell them what happened. So he took me to the ER, and the doctor saw me and they bandaged it up. A couple weeks later, I came back and, they had to file the bone down so that the skin they put like, I think it was like some pig skin over it to help the healing. And so that because it was just total shredded. And then the doctor said to me, maybe you should take up an instrument or, and I thought, well, I told him, I said, the guitar, I love the guitar. I've always loved, Van Halen and Black Sabbath albums. And so the doctor was like, there you go, Dad, you're going to have to buy him a guitar. And I was like, oh, I guess I'm not in trouble.
What the heck? Well, that's
so
kind of a crazy
I started playing
story.
guitar.
That's amazing.
So I started playing guitar and, started taking lessons over here at a local music store. And, maybe took like 5 or 6. And, then that was, I was hooked.
Wow,
and then I felt like that was like I felt like I found something to not only be expressive, but focus my energy and found a bit of an escape,
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of mine, nobody else in my family played music.
Right.
So it was kind of like the sacred, the sacred thing that I was able to access,
Wow.
It's like your singular one voice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My mom at the time, I remember her coming into my room and listening to me play. And she told me something. I remember she said, this is giving you, this is your voice. Mm-hmm. She said, this is, even though you're not speaking, this instrument is giving you, it's letting you say things that you aren't normally able to say. And I was like, wow, it was really insightful when I was like probably 14 or 15. And it just always stuck with me, And so whenever I played music, I always felt like this is an amplified extension of me and what I'm saying, in a different language.
very much the same in my life as well.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, it's so amazing that you were able to find that at such a young age too. I think about just a lot of people who don't have something to channel that angst or that energy into being young, or being like a full-fledged adult, but how art as a general concept is so powerful in that way, music or otherwise, painting, whatever it could be, to be able to like extend yourself or to express yourself in a way that is, I don't know, it's just a different methodology in which when it can express themselves. I think that's so powerful, and I do you feel like in a way music kind of saved your life, or would you?
Oof, man, I feel like it saves my life every day, because I'm able to find those moments in the process that satisfies me, that lets my mind come back down to like not overthinking, and it puts my mind and my heart and soul like into a harmony together, that it's such a like I crave it, on a daily basis. Like, even if I don't get to play my music or a day or something's out, if it's a week and I haven't picked up my instrument, I'm off. But as soon as I play music and I kind of get lost in the moment, it all kind of calms down, and I'm able to like feel at peace, I guess.
You feel like it maybe expands your ability to exist in the moment and live kind of intuitively, and that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I find that oneness with a higher being or God, or the universe, or whatever you might want to call it. I feel like I'm at one with, and it's about finding that, those in the moment, or the process of creating, even if I'm not like quote writing, if I'm just listening to the a few notes, or making noise, and it's just, if it's satisfying me, then and I'm finding myself getting lost in the moment. It's just
almost like it's like its own muscle, that the more it's exercised, the longer it exists, either like before or after you're, specifically creating. It kind of becomes like a consistent, at least for me, like a consistent mindset and like state of consciousness. But if it's not being used over the course of like a couple weeks or a month, it isn't there,
Yeah. Like for the album that I did with Chris, I feel like this is a very matured version of that. Because I can stay in the moment for, an hour and a half.
Right.
We'll go into these improvised kind of musical journeys, and it's almost like a meditation. It's almost like being in that long moment where it's like you're not, it's not broken up at all. It's just this long consciousness of a
you have no idea how much time has gone by
of a jam.
Yeah. You know what's
Yeah, and you that's Go ahead.
No, continue.
No, you're going to say something about interest being what's interesting.
Oh, well, I was just thinking about that, the creation of artwork or something that puts you in that kind of like otherworldly trance, or, in the being in the moment, whatever it may be. I think potentially people, I'm kind of making a generalization of this, but, use psychedelics or alcohol or something to be able to feel that in a way, but like to kind of sedate that within themselves, or like to immediately get there. You know what I mean? And I think like,
Yeah.
which I think in small doses is fine, but I think that is what's so interesting about really being present with the creation of an artwork, is because you can transport there at any given moment without having to like lean on a substance or something like that. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Those are ways to kind of, if you're going to have a drink after work, it'll quiet your mind. It is a shortcut,
Yeah, exactly.
but, and there's ways to get there a lot quicker for, I guess, someone that's hasn't found their creative outlet,
Their voice.
because, or their hobby or whatever it might be, or their voice. Yeah.
Totally. There's
yeah, it's
mhm. Oh no, I was going to say there's this quote by I think it was, her name is Mary Louise von Franz, and she's a Swiss Jungian psychologist. And I remember her saying this. I don't know if it was in one of her books or, but it was something to the effect of like, if you are a creative person and if you don't utilize that creativity, it turns into some sort of poison. And perhaps,
wow.
I mean, just kind of riffing off this idea of substance abuse, perhaps like in my opinion, I think everyone's creative, right? Whether you found that or not, whatever that creative thing is. But, whenever kids, you see kids and they're just kind of like finger painting, or, they're just using their hands and pushing around Play-Doh or whatever, you know what I mean? There's a certain sense of human creativity there, and it's magic, it's beautiful. And perhaps, people use substances because that poison is seeped in a way. I don't know, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, there could be a lot of truth to that.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm speculating. But
yeah, it's a good observation.
Yeah. But I know we're kind of like running probably past time, but I just wanted to ask, like, do you have any like advice or anything for anyone that's listening? Any life advice, any sort of anything?
Life advice. I mean, I think my biggest takeaway from our conversation today is the power of creativity and how it can alleviate so much stress, I think, out of everybody's life if they had something they can. And it gives you a sense of purpose. I feel like that a lot of people kind of go around, doing their thing and then forgetting really that we're kind of here to create something beautiful and share it with one another. I feel like that's, one of the reasons we all inhabit the planet. And whether it's being kind, or it's art in some form, but a lot of, maybe it's the two together, which is sharing those artistic ventures, whatever it might be, with one another to help each other. And I feel like, through my career, I've had so many people come up to me and say, "You saved my life because of this song or that." It's so rewarding, and it feels great. But you could help somebody, on so many different levels of, it doesn't matter if you're famous or not, but sharing something creative that you've done, it only opens up a dialogue. It connects people. And I feel like a lot of people should be open to share their creative ideas
Totally.
and with one another.
Totally. Yeah, I think like whether you're famous or not, we all can affect people. Like even if you think of like someone's mom or someone's grandma, or like maybe someone's grandma like nourishes the family by cooking food, or there's so many ways that you can affect your own communities, whether that's on a small level or on a bigger level. And I think like the power of that is so important. And I think, because we're all very simple creatures with the power of gods in our hands, like I think we forget that, that how much we can help each other, as opposed to just constantly comparing ourselves to other people, so, but I think
that stuff is toxic, that comparing yourself, and instead of looking to others for inspiration.
Right.
For sure. Oh yeah, 100%. Well, yeah, I mean, that's also why I brought up in the beginning of the podcast, like, like I noticed that within you is this kindness, and I think that is such a beautiful example for other people, the just treating others how you'd want to be treated, the sort of golden rule,
Yeah.
And I think you embody that. So I wanted to bring it up.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And, just trying to live my best life, as they say.
Yeah, I hear you, man. Well, cool. Thanks for doing this, man. Appreciate
thank
you
you
and your time. Yeah.
Yeah, you guys, that was an amazing conversation. I'm happy that I was able to do it finally. Thanks for being patient and dealing with my technical stuff.
Oh no, you're
good. Yeah,
you're good, brother. Yeah.
And when you talk about this stuff with others, it reinforces the things that are true, and reminds me of of how grateful I am. It reminds me of just how lucky we are to all be experiencing life in different forms and through different eyes, and trying to bring something good to everybody's life is what it's all about.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, totally.
Okay, man.
All right.
Take it easy.
Out, y'all.
Okay, you guys. See you
later.